Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. My name is David McLeod, and I am your Life Mastery Coach, welcoming you to Soul Empowerment. And we are embarking on episode number 29 today. This is called Healthy Boundaries with a question mark. We're going to have a really, really deep and intense, I would say, and hopefully enlightening and entertaining conversation about boundaries. You know, the positives, the negatives, and everything that they mean. And before we get started with that, I'd like to go around and I will rotate around clockwise on my screen. And the first person on my screen is Christy. Welcome, Christy. Would you like to please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on Soul Empowerment. I am an integrative quantum energy healer, and I kind of focus on healing the non-physical aspects of self, which can sometimes be at the root of physical pain and disease. Also help people balance their mental wellness and spiritual alignment. And I'm situated in Wells, Maine, do in-person work there, but I also work over the internet worldwide. I was just mentioning as we started out, I'm a wife and mother. I've been married 42 years. I'm 45 at the time, so yes, I was a child bride. Or I'm 45 now. So life just keeps getting better, and I'm happy to share insights and joy and life hacks, if you will, with others.
Well, thank you, Christy. And I'm 28, just in case anybody's wondering. Thank you for sharing that. Sarah, welcome. Why don't you share a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Hello, I'm Sarah, or you can call me Sarah Jane, your choice. I am very proud to say I am 64. I have no problems with my age. In fact, the older I've got, the happier I've got. So, and that is down to, I'm in the UK, in a south coast town called Bournemouth. Some of you may have heard of Southampton, where the Titanic sailed from. So not far from there. I work with sound energy, toning the voice. And I work on many different levels, including the same levels that Christy works at, those deeper levels, the levels I call the cellular memory level. So they don't necessarily have to be remembered by your mind, because they're deep down inside of you. And just like Christy, I work from my home. And gratefully, I've been able to open my therapy room again after 2 years. And I work via the internet. And I love doing programs like this with David and Christy. I do my own on Gift of Healing TV. And I think, like all of us, we're guests on other people's programs. Very much here to support people, to spread the word. Having these conversations for me is brilliant, and I love doing it. We've all got more than one bow, one string to our bow. That's the saying.
Right. Well, thank you, Sarah, and welcome again. And for those of you who are used to our foursome, Nancy Stevens, our other member, she's got some business to attend to today, so she's not able to join us. Anyway, why don't we just dive right in? Boundaries. We hear this all the time, don't we? You've got to set your own boundaries. You've got to put your stake in the sand, so to speak, or a line in the sand, that this is how far you will go, or how far you expect other people to go in order to connect with you, and that sort of thing. So let's just talk about the concept of boundaries in an open-ended way. And I'm just going to open the floor. So who has something that's just bubbling up and needs to be said right now?
I'd like to start with the childhood boundaries. The boundaries our parents set for us, because they do. They love us, they care about us, and they wish to keep us safe. Those boundaries come from that. They also come from their learnings from their own childhood. The boundaries potentially that their parents set for them, the experiences that they have had. And I think that's a generational thing, because obviously, there could be 20, 30, in some cases, nearly 40 years between the boundaries that they went through and the boundaries they're then setting on their children. And they don't necessarily work from one generation to the next, because life moves on. And it is good. You can watch families where the children appear to have absolutely no boundaries, but actually they can be floundering because they don't know when to stop. They've got no guidance. And then you've got those families where the boundaries are so tight. But, different people work in different ways when it comes to their children. And that affects how we all grow up, and then how we set or don't set any boundaries ourselves. So that's just some food for thought.
Yeah, that's a great start. And I think, one of the boundaries that I remember, I may have even inflicted this on my kids, was don't talk to strangers. And so what we do when we make a statement like that to our kids is we immediately instill fear in their minds and in their hearts. We're giving them this idea that somehow all strangers are bad. All people that you don't know are bad. And what are we really doing to them? We're if they listen, and most kids will, especially if they're 4 or 5 years old, or maybe a little bit older even, they'll listen to that and they'll avoid strangers like everything. And what does that create within their lives? And so what we end up doing is we instill messages in our children without necessarily consciously wanting to do that gives them the idea that the world itself is unsafe, that people are dangerous, and they have to be watching themselves all the time. Talk about creating stress on a young child. I mean, so that's just something that came to mind as you were speaking. And I know that today it's probably even worse with all the horrible child and sex trafficking stuff that's going on in the world right now. Can you imagine what parents must be telling their kids to try and keep them safe? It's no wonder I see parents today, they'll actually sit in their car by the bus stop waiting for the bus to come to pick up their kids for school. Kids really don't have the freedom at all anymore to go and experience life, and maybe to make some mistakes that are not going to kill them, but might cause some temporary pain. So what are we really doing here? At one time, maybe the boundaries were healthy, but are they healthy today?
I do a lot of work with helping people release self-limiting beliefs and really I call them fear programs that were kind of seeded in childhood. And I think when we look at either ourselves as parents or our parents, the root of all of this is our fear of losing our child. It's not necessarily keeping that child safe, it's keeping us safe from losing our child.
Yes. And
so as parents, I think if we can be more mindful of that, Spirit is suggesting I share this. It seems a little off topic, but I had a friend who told her children often, I would die if anything happened to you. And one of the children ended up getting a very serious illness, and the other one was slated to be a bone marrow donor for the other one. And oh my gosh, it just turned into such a terrible, stressful situation for the child who had to save the sister and save the mother. And so we have to be really careful with our language with our children and know that we're all safe. And And the more we are in fear, the more we open the door to the things that we're fearing. So stand in the light, folks. Be light, stand in the light. There's no safer place. And start to really look at your own fear programs that you're running and, love them free, seeing that, your parents loved you so much they didn't want to lose you.
Right.
But maybe some of it is not healthy.
Well, I want to just say, first of all, I didn't think any of that was off topic. I thought it was perfect. And so thank you for sharing that. And what I would like to add is I think you really hit something very, very important here, and that is the concept of language. What our words really have an impact on other people. And more often than not, when we speak, most of us are just choosing our words because we're used to using those words. We don't really think necessarily what they mean. And when you talked about, I would die if anything happened to you, I mean, that really hit me in the heart, because I don't think I've heard that from my parents, but it feels like, oh my God, I have to be careful. I got to protect you from dying. That's how it landed on me.
Yeah, I'm getting full goosebumps when you say that. It's heavy. It's very heavy.
It's very heavy. And the other thing is, if you think about something, this may seem off topic too, but think about love songs and how often our love songs include language like that. I can't live without you. You are my everything. This is supposedly romantic love that is supposed to be, inspiring and healthy. And every time I hear it, I just want to throw up. Seriously. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. In today's music, I mean, I don't even listen to it. Most of it is so disgusting, but you get my point. I heard, I was watching a show the other night, and there was a piece of music played by Ella Fitzgerald from the 1940s. And the song is entitled, Let It Please Be Him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, let it please be him, or I shall die. And I'm thinking, wow, so it's been going on for eons, this kind of language. And what are we doing when we say stuff like that? We're putting a huge weight on top of the other person. And is that healthy? I don't think so.
I'd like to touch back on this sort of, the boundary of don't speak to strangers, because that can impact us later. None of us would have met. We were all strangers, but we had the courage to talk to each other. We had the courage to put ourselves out there so that we could connect. And in this day and age, we have the joy of the internet. We can connect with people all over the world. If we have the courage to say, let's connect, let's speak, let's talk, let's have a video chat. But that, don't speak to strangers. And I don't get me wrong, I can totally get why parents do, especially today, with all the stuff that can happen to children, the kidnapping, the murders, etc., etc. I can really get why parents say, don't speak to strangers, and certainly don't accept sweets or anything like that from strangers. I can understand why parents do it, because it is a matter of keeping the child safe. It's how we word that so that it doesn't overly impact the child and hold it back from meeting new people, conversing, because that becomes, oh, do I talk to anybody in my brand new class?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a misnomer, though, isn't it? Because, I mean, I don't know about you, Sarah, but in the work I do, I have worked with so many people who have been abused by people they knew.
Oh, absolutely.
So, it's misguided, it's misdirected. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, can you imagine if we, well, so here's my belief. I believe in total freedom. I believe that every single one of us should have as much freedom as possible, as long as that freedom doesn't impinge on someone else's rights. That is what I believe. And I think the same thing holds true for children. Imagine if instead of scaring children about strangers, we could teach them how to check in with themselves and say, is this a good person to get to know? What if we taught them that instead?
Gut feeling.
Yeah, they might make mistakes and they might still get in trouble. I mean, who of us hasn't made a mistake in trusting someone that seemed trustworthy only to get, let's say stabbed in the back politely somewhere down the road? I think we've all experienced that. Do we stop trusting people because one person violated that trust? Well, maybe some of us do. But if we can learn to understand that maybe I just made a mistake in opening myself up to a particular kind of person, and now I can elevate my consciousness about that and start to become more aware. And next time, maybe feel in a little more carefully before I make a decision. I think that's what we ought to be doing as parents, is teaching our kids how to do that.
I'm not a parent, so it is very obviously difficult for me. I'm just an aunt and a great aunt. And I just think about the people that I work with, the working with the inner child of people. And at what age, and it's different for every child, because children learn in their own way at different paces. But what age do children start to understand gut instinct, inspiration? Yes, they should be encouraged to become aware of it as soon as they can. But it's the understanding of what that is. And that can be the difficult thing. Is, I look at my very young niece and great nieces and nephews, and they're just about play, and they have to go to school and they have to do the learning bit. But they are at the age they are. One's coming up 7. The eldest one's coming up 12. Hopefully, she's starting to be that more attuned. Some 5-year-olds, 3-year-olds can be attuned to that. Children are different, and it's how do parents deal with the different ages? And that has to be down to the parents being open to what's being suggested here, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I will also say this. As a parent, I've had my children, all of them, at one time or another when they were quite young, like 2 or 3 years old, or even 4, say something to me like, I don't like that guy. And I'd say, why? Well, he looks funny, or he smells funny, or something. They are in tune with their gut feeling. And this is the problem that I think that Christy was alluding to earlier. Sometimes, especially if my child would say something like, and this didn't happen to me, but I know it's happened to other people. If my child said something like, Grampy gives me the creeps. Most of us as parents would say, oh, there's nothing wrong with Grampy. You're just overreacting. Go give him a hug. Sit on his lap. That's how parents would often react to children. But if we are open-hearted enough to really listen to what they have to say, and look at their eyes and say, so tell me what you mean. Why does Grampy why does he seem creepy to you? Tell me a little bit about that.
Or just accept it and don't force the interaction.
That's true. And I think that just being open tells the child that it's safe to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they say something uncomfortable. And that's really what I think the secret of parenting is being able to give your children permission to speak their truth whenever it comes up. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So do we take boundaries a step further?
Okay, go ahead.
How about, because it's then about moving on, isn't it? Slowly over the years, we learn that actually from childhood, as we grow up, it's for us to set our boundaries. How we are, what we are will accept in the way of treatment from other people. Because if you, in our family, we used to get told off if we ever swore. And it very much was a matter of if you swore, you were likely to get in a great deal of trouble. So swearing in our family, and I still don't like hearing swearing. I've done my little bit of it, but on the whole, I don't, because that is how I was brought up. But I appreciate other people are brought up, and there's just, the language is what it is in their families. Or you may not have been brought up with it, but then the job you go and do, it just surrounds you and it just becomes the norm. What is your norm? And what are you comfortable with? And if somebody is around you, and swearing is something that obviously can be considered, oh, you're really worried about swearing? But great, let's have something that could be considered quite light, because there are majorly heavy things we could go into, I'm sure. But it's actually, do you know what? I'd rather you didn't use that sort of language around me. Or you remove yourself from hearing too much of that. When I did the trip to Romania to track the wolves and lynx in the Carpathians back in 2000, 22 years ago, one of the girls that was in that group, every second word was the F word. And I ended up by sharing a room with her. Oh, yeah.
Of course.
It goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Life's best teacher.
But, you know, it wasn't a matter, it wasn't for me to turn around and tell her that she shouldn't be like that. It was for me to, as much as possible, to remove myself from that. And
Or to communicate, communicate what's bothering you, because if you not this particular situation, but let's just say, somebody I'm in relationship with is doing something that's really annoying to me or makes me feel disrespected or whatever. If I just remove myself, then they have to guess why I'm removing myself. But if I communicate, hey, you're doing this thing and it makes me feel like I'm not respected, is that what you mean by this? Then at least it gives them the option to either make a choice of changing their behavior or saying, I'm sorry you feel disrespected, but this has nothing to do with you,
Right.
So I think we have to look at, as adults, at our needs and communicating this kind of boundary. That's a small one, as you say, but maybe
Well,
you
I
could
think
really hit it off with
totally.
that woman if you said, hey, I really, can't take this these F-bombs, like it's stressing me out. I'm gonna, leave. Maybe she would have said, hey, wait, I don't have to do that.
Oh, there was no way of leaving, because that was a fortnight's trip, and that was it. And it was okay. I knew I'd got an end to it. And I absolutely get it. If it's a relationship that you are in, then absolutely, it's the conversation to be had. Then you have to decide what you do, what you're prepared to put up with. And David, I know you wanted to chip in.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, if you think about it, if there were no relationships, what would life be like?
Boring.
So in reality, everything is about relationship. And I was going to say what Christy was talking about. When something is bothering me, it's my responsibility to share that with the person who I believe might be triggering that discomfort, whatever it might be. If it's just a casual relationship and I'm probably not going to have anything more to do with that person, I'm not going to waste my time. But if it's somebody who is important to me in some way, a coworker, someone I have to work with on a regular basis, a life partner, a child in my life, anybody like that with whom my relationship is deemed to be an important one, then I have to take responsibility for my own reaction, and I have to find a way to communicate that without putting the blame on the other person. And that's the secret to good communication, by the way. If you let's say you guys started swearing at me and blaming me for all kinds of stuff. Well, all of that is not about me. It's about you. You're pretending it's about me and projecting it onto me. Now, if I react to that, my responsibility now is to notice my reaction and say, okay, Sarah, I noticed you said this to me, and it really hurt. I felt the pain in my heart when I heard that, and it reminded me of the way my mom used to talk to me. And now, so what I'm doing, I'm telling you, is I get that I am projecting my mother onto you in some way, and I don't want to do that. I want to be in relationship with Sarah, not with my mom. My mom's not here right now. You see? So I'm hoping that you and I can find a way to resolve this. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm not even asking you to change your behavior. I'm just telling you what happens to me when that behavior happens right in front of me. That's all. You can decide what you want to do about it. So that's what I'm talking about, is taking responsibility for my own reaction, sharing my reaction vulnerably without blaming or shaming or trying to make you wrong. And I might not always succeed at that, by the way. Sometimes my language might come across like I am blaming you, and I'm sorry when that happens, but I'm just saying this is what we all need to do, I think. Because let's face it, the moment I have a reaction, that is when a boundary has been violated that I may not have even known about. And you certainly didn't know about it because you weren't expecting that reaction from me. You see?
It's also about the understanding of the terminology, isn't it? We come from two countries that speak the same language, but we don't.
That's right.
Sort of, and it really is. It's about, and when I think about, I've said this before, my sisters and myself, anyone would think we've been brought up in 3 different households, 3 different families totally, because the things that each one of us experienced and our understanding of words, it's our perception. And so every single one of us is unique. And the words that you are hearing may not have the meaning I'm intending.
That's right.
Mhm.
It is. It's asking those questions.
One of the tools that I've used and kind of suggest to people when I do work with couples is, if go back to David's situation where, or I'll make up a different one, maybe David said something, could be totally innocent, but I hear it as something that's a wound for me. So what I would say to David is, David, when you said that, I heard that you don't think I'm whatever. Is that what you were saying? Because that's how I felt it. That's how I received it. And then David may say, no, I was giving you a compliment, So this can happen sometimes where we don't hear the words that the person's saying. So when we start to feel ourselves like going into a spin of emotion that seems out of context with the conversation, then we need to time ourselves out and say, okay, just be honest with the person. I'm not really sure where this is coming from, but I just want to let you know that I'm feeling, upset. This is how I heard the words. you probably didn't mean them that way, but I just want you to understand this is how I heard it.
Absolutely. I've been saying for a long time, if there's something that you actually get that ouch, oh, you know, what's that all that about? You so say, yeah, along the lines of, did you mean what I heard? And what I heard was, and you rephrase it so that it, you know, if you're repeating exact, of course they meant what they said. So if you ask the question, did you mean what you said? The answer is going to be yes. If you ask the question, did you mean what I heard? And rephrase it, so that's exactly what you're saying, Christy.
Yes.
Then absolutely, you've got a chance of potentially saving an argument, a fallout, goodness knows what else that need never happen.
And I've had situations with a family member where that person said they meant what I heard in a bad way. And, you know, I had to make that decision that I didn't want to be treated that way and walk away from a relationship. So, you know, sometimes it's painful to ask those questions and have to walk away from a relationship, but we have to assess, is it more painful to be in that relationship? And for me, it was.
Yeah. And that's where you were setting a healthy boundary for yourself. And so this is really important conversation that we're having here. I think one area of boundaries that we didn't actually discuss in advance, but which I think comes up for a lot of people, is boundaries around sex. I think about how things have changed over the last 20, 25 years. I mean, they've been changing for a long time. But I've noticed in myself a complete shift in the way I choose to approach women now. In other words, I am so afraid of being accused of sexual harassment that I simply avoid communicating, which is not a good thing, because most of the time, if I were to just speak my heart and say, look, I'm kind of attracted to you and I'd like to get to know you better, that's not a harassment as far as I know, but some people might see it that way. So I kind of hold back, And how many men are holding back right now for that very reason? Even though most women will not respond as if it were a sexual harassment kind of situation. So we have been so conditioned by societal messages, in addition to messages that we got from our parents and from other authority figures in our lives, but societal messages that, I think that we're really dooming ourselves to living lives of quiet desperation if we don't get out of this pretty damn soon.
But, as an empowered master, David, you can look at that and say, okay, in a way, this is self-sabotaging my quest to find a mate. So, I have to go against it. And you can even say to somebody, hey, I'm really aware, or I'm paranoid about, the sexual harassment climate right now, but I just want to ask if you're interested in dating.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know what you're saying, but we can let these, again, a fear hold us back, or we can, push through it and find our opportunity, I guess.
I think it's with everything. It's find a way of being yourself as naturally as possible. And if somebody is offended by that, then they're obviously not the right person for you. And it's not comfortable. It really isn't comfortable. Sort of, I worked as security on a singles club for a couple of years. So I was actually on the door. And I remember one guy coming down the stairs and he said, and how do you think you're going to stop a fight? And I said, and I looked at him and I said, I'd look at you, smile sweetly, and ask you to stop. And he looked at me and he said, and we probably would, wouldn't we? But you know, and I had one evening where 4 different guys asked me out, and and I'm afraid it was no to all of them. But you know, it was a singles club. But actually, I'd got my friend Trevor there already in the background. I was just enjoying myself. I was able to go out because once they closed the door, I was allowed to go and have a good old boogie on the dance floor. And we did that with
Oh, I want to see that.
oh, the good old, oh, absolutely. Is there a record? Is it called Sandstorm? That's a real, oh, it's an instrumental. Oh my God, I love dancing to that. So, so yeah, absolutely. And I made some amazing friends there, you know, and touched a lot of lives there. And it's that openness. It's what environment you put yourself. The number of emails and messages I get on things like LinkedIn from people who are looking for relationships, and it's just like, I'm not here for that. And I have to, and as nicely as possible, just go back and say, not here for that. And you have to. And if somebody's not interested, they've got to say so. But our boundary should be being ourselves. And if there are other people feel it's stepping across their boundary, but as you said, it's about healthy boundaries. So
Now, I want to segue. This is kind of going into the physical boundaries. And in our pre-talk, I loved when David said, how long should a hug last? It lasts until the first person lets go. And that's something I needed to hear because I'm a hugger. So, I mean, I could hug somebody for like minutes and not feel uncomfortable, not, you know, just be in pure bliss of just loving that person. But some people, including my children, are not comfortable with that.
Right. That's exactly right. Well, I've done some interesting workshops around hugging. You know, there's all kinds of different hugs that we use to suggest a little bit, you know, get tiny bit of intimacy, but not too close. You know, you got the big A-frame hug, you got the side hug, you know, where you kind of hug each other on the side, sort of thing. These are not hugs. These are, you know, brief, you know, short and non-intimate connections. I mean, a real hug is, I think, starts with the eyes. It starts with eye connection and just opening up and saying, I would love to share a hug with you. Are you open to that? And then just closing in and going heart to heart and just staying in that presence for whatever time. And it's an infinite amount of time, which can last only a microsecond. But the key is, as soon as one person says, okay, I'm done, that's it. You know that the hug is over, right? And hugs don't have to have any other things involved, you know, no back patting or butt patting, which some people like to do, especially if it's a man and a woman kind of situation. No, that's not what you're there for. You're there to just connect heart to heart and eye to eye, soul to soul. That's the purpose of a hug. So if we can remember that, and if we can choose to enter into a hug with that mindset, then the other person will feel that energy and will probably be more willing to stay present to it for a longer period of time. But don't force it. And also, here's another thing that I think people need to learn is, may I share a hug with you? No, thank you. I prefer not to. Thank you. Bless you. And just give them a namaste and away you go.
No.
You know, because no is a perfectly acceptable answer, and people have to be honored for choosing to say no. And I know you've talked about this a lot too, Sarah.
yeah, oh, absolutely. But I think thinking about people, there are families, they have no idea how to be tactile because they are not shown. Children are not shown that sort of affection, that hug, that cuddle, even if they fall down and scratch their knee. You know, some parents don't know how to do that, and they don't know how to do it because it didn't happen for them as a child, and it probably didn't happen for their parents as a child. going back. And as much as I did come from a tactile family per se, I didn't feel loved. And so, of course, that was very strange to me to start with. But having got into the complementary therapy world and sort of learning Reiki, it was sort of everybody hugs everybody. And you just do. And, you know, as I said, my therapy room's opened again just recently, but, you know, the clients coming back, it's, are we doing hugs, Sarah? And I said, I think from a point of view at the moment, we have to say no. But my clients are used to receiving a hug from me. And that's the way of it. And it's just like, you know, sort of still having to wear masks while doing sessions and all the rest of it. And it is alien because because absolutely it's this complementary therapy world tends to be a hugging world. But yes, it is also being respectful within that hug, as you said. Yes, no patting of anything.
Right. Yeah.
Christy, do you want to add to that?
No, I do usually hug people when they come to see me. Usually people don't know what to expect. They're nervous. I'll ask them if I can hug them, and most of the time they want it and they are so grateful. I think we are starved for human touch.
Absolutely.
Especially, you know, with the pandemic and keeping 6 feet away from everybody else and masks. We can't see people's smiles. Yeah, so I think it is important, but I do think it's important to keep a hug, a heart connection, not at all a sensual or sexual connection.
Exactly right. You know, I think I talked about this during our pre-call conversation, but I wanted to bring it up anyway because it really was so poignant for me. We're talking about hugs right now, and I saw this video of a young woman. She must have been maybe 30, 35 or so years old in France somewhere. And she was just standing on the street and she had a little sign saying free hugs, and she had a blindfold on. And she was just standing there with her arms open. And it was just, I was so touched by this. There was something highly spiritual about the experience, watching people show up, you know, like eyes wide open, and some of them would talk to her, some of them would just kind of dive in and go for the hug. But it was really, really a beautiful experience. And I think you're right, Christy. People are starved for that kind of connection.
So what I'm getting from that in the moment, David, is that, you know, some people do feel vulnerable when they hug, but look at how vulnerable she was putting herself. She was putting herself in an extremely vulnerable position, so that maybe people who normally feel vulnerable felt less vulnerable.
Yeah. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And if you, I don't even know if I have the link for it, but you could probably do a search for, you know, free hugs in France or something like that and find the video. It's really, I found it very, very touching. And I mean, there's people of all ages and sizes and colors and you name it that approached this woman, including children. And when she knew a child was there, she would get down on her knees and, you know, just be there for the hug. It was just a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Yeah, and I've
Hugging
seen
is such
others.
a natural and intentional human experience. You know, other species do kind of have their own form of what do I want to say, affection for each other. But hugging is uniquely human. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
But then you say that, and I've seen videos of animals and humans, and I'm trying to think, was it was a swan or was it a turkey or something? Anyway, it was quite a big bird, and it was their rescuer or somebody that raised them or something, and they literally came and their wings went round them, and they absolutely went into the hug. Elephants that would wrap their trunks round somebody, their form of being able to give a hug, you know, and you know, and think about pets. when the animal comes up and sticks their head into your neck, and they're on, and cats have been known to put their arms round, they have put front legs round the neck. You know, I think animals get the hug thing probably more than some humans.
So I'm kind of getting almost like an anti as in opposite, anti-boundary message coming in. That's something along the lines of what happens when we're not getting enough from people that we're in relationship. It's almost like the opposite of setting a boundary, right? It's not that we don't want them to come closer, it's that we like need them to come closer. So maybe we could talk about that for a moment. What happens when, again, I guess it's communication. What happens when we're not getting the level of intimacy in our relationships? And I don't mean sex. I just mean, you know, conversation, connection, frequency, that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I think you're bang on again, Christy, talking about what we're talking about here is maybe removing boundaries, or at least temporarily opening the boundaries to make ourselves available for connection. And as you mentioned before, if I have a need for connection, maybe one of the things I have to do is express that need and describe it to someone that I trust and say, you know, I could really use a hug right now. Are you open to sharing with me? Or I would really love to just be held. I'm feeling this energy, this kind of childlike energy in me. I mean, how many people are willing to actually say that to another person? It takes courage, because you're putting yourself in a situation where you're vulnerable. But vulnerability is what really, really attracts people, even though some people might want to take advantage of that vulnerability.
I'm talking maybe a little bit more about if I'm going to use my own example, I guess. I recently had a conversation with one of our daughters because we had a visit and she said something which I felt as a boundary. And so I pulled back. I made my own boundary, right? Because she made a boundary. This was all nonverbal. And then a month went by and we barely talked. She doesn't live near me. And I ended up calling her and saying, okay, so this happened when you were here, and I felt it as a boundary. I didn't use those words, but I felt it as, you know, a little bit of a closed door. So I pulled back and I said, I don't want to pull back. And I kind of don't think you want me to pull back either. So that's kind of what I mean. It's more like if there's someone you're in relationship with, but maybe you don't connect with them as often as you'd like to. Maybe you never hear from them. You're the one that always calls them. Like, how do you ask? Can you ask for more?
So what I'm hearing, and what I totally agree with, is ultimately boundaries always boil down to some form of communication. And if you can formalize the communication in a way that you know both of you are on the same page, then the boundary can be very clear. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of murky. It's going to be one of these confusing situations that one or both of you may have you both may be wrong about what you think is really going on. One of you may be right and the other wrong, or vice versa. Or maybe you're both right and you're just honoring each other's imaginary boundaries. Ultimately, it boils down to communication. And that's, if you take the word relationship and communication, I think they're synonymous with each other, you know? So that's what we have to do. We have to communicate, and we have to find the courage to speak our truth and to share what's going on for ourselves. And that truth requires vulnerability. It's really that simple.
And sometimes the person can't meet you where you want to be met, but at least you know.
That's right.
At least you know they can't meet you there. So you can then deal with what is rather than always thinking in your head of what could be.
Right.
This has been a very, very powerful lesson for me in my own birth family. Always having this ideal of what relationships could be like, but the other person didn't share that ideal. They didn't want to go to that space with me. So it's totally out of my control to go to that space.
Yeah.
You used a very important word there, David, courage. Because it takes an awful lot of courage. But you can't do anything if you don't come from a place, or you can't do much if you don't come from a place of trying to at least understand what is going on, and then having the courage to say, okay, what is going on? And because you're trying to understand it, but you could be totally wrong. And I mean, a classic, and it was only sometime last year, maybe the year before, that I sort of suddenly understood something about my second marriage. While we were together and unmarried, things were one way. And yes, it did change when we got married. And it was only, as I said, a couple of years ago that I suddenly thought, I remembered looking at his parents and how his dad was with his mum. His dad was highly educated, and his mum, bless her, because he'd retrained as a teacher, so she'd gone out earning a living, but cleaning people's houses and doing people's ironing. She was not as educated as him. And therefore, I don't believe they had much ever in the way of conversations. He would come home and the meal would be ready for him on the table. There was no conversation. And that is what happened with my own marriage. He may be home first, but he expected me to then go and cook the meal and still not talk to me because he was more intent on watching soap operas or sport on the telly. His idea, his awareness of marriage was what he witnessed from his parents.
Sure.
And that was that the husband didn't speak to the wife. If there's anything that any of us have shared here in this program that helps people to look at what is going on in their own lives, where are the boundaries? Do they really exist? Are they boundaries you've put up? Are they potentially boundaries other people have put up? Are you prepared to have the courage to be vulnerable and to ask? Because the truth of the matter is, if we do not talk and listen, nobody's going anywhere. Boundaries can't be shifted to the benefit of all.
Right. Very good. Thank you. And, you know, as you were speaking, first of all, I've had this little image of you know, being told, you know, children are to be seen and not heard. What's the other one that I heard? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you talk, which doesn't make any sense at all, because I can only listen as long as someone else is speaking. So we listen an equal amount of time to the person talking. You know what I'm saying? But that's beside the point. I mean, that really wasn't what I wanted to say. I wanted to get back to what Christy was talking about, this birth family idea that you mentioned. Well, I call it family of origin. It's the same basic idea. But I find it interesting that some of my deepest and most powerful and most intimate relationships, in fact, I would say all of them, happen with people who had nothing to do with my family of origin. In fact, my relationships with the people in my family of origin has been like totally superficial. for most of my life, in spite of efforts on my part to try and connect and to deepen that connection. They just don't want it. They see a certain image of me from way back when I was still a very angry and resentful person. That's the me they want to remember for some reason. They don't want to meet. Whoops, sorry, just knocked my microphone over. They don't want to meet this new guy.
You angry man, you.
Well, you know, I still have some of that energy. I won't deny it, but it's not, it doesn't come out the way it used to.
No, I know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm just saying that they have chosen to remember me a particular way. And so I suspect that in your family of origin, there's probably some of that going on there too. So
And
consequently,
I'm sure you realize, David, you don't argue with that. You
What do you
can't change someone else's opinion of you.
right. What I can do is invite them to learn more about who I am now rather than remembering who I was before. And if they choose to do so, then great. You know, if they don't,
Yeah.
well, that's their choice. Then that's their loss as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
You know, whenever I see anybody in my family of origin or not who makes an effort to grow and to expand, I celebrate that. You know, I don't try and hold them down like so many other people do. And that's unfortunately something that seems to happen in a lot of family dynamics. People want you to stay the way you are. They don't want you to grow. They don't want you to succeed. They don't want you to get better. They want you to just be who they want you to be. And so sometimes we have to fight hard to defeat those boundaries that are kind of imposed on us by the people in our circles of influence.
Mm. I think the other part of that too is, like, for me, I had a lot of shoulds in my upbringing. You know, you should do this. You should, in dealing with your parents, you must do this and that. And so I was doing a lot of things because I should, not because I wanted to. And I ultimately learned that the person on the receiving end of that didn't even want me doing it. So, you know, it's again being present with what is, not the shoulds, not the you have tos, not the, you know, expectations, because a lot of that stuff, it's just made up. It's not real.
Technically, I think many people would say we're making everything up as we go. So
I'm really sorry. I've got to go because of my next program. But this has been brilliant. Thank you, folks. And I will see you again next month.
all right.
Thank you,
See you.
Sarah.
Bye, Sarah. Thank you.
Have a good show.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Yeah, so there we are. We have I was about to start wrapping it up anyway, but here we are talking about the pros and cons of boundaries. We're talking about whether they work or whether they don't. That's a pretty involved and complex subject. Christy, do you have anything else you'd like to say before I close it out?
I think just, you know, it's been very good to really talk about how these are things we have to talk about. We can't assume anybody gets our boundaries if we haven't communicated them. And as we noted, sometimes we don't even know our boundaries until someone bumps into them. And then we just owe it to that person to have a conversation.
Yeah. And that's something that I hope everybody who watches this will come away with, is a little bit more motivation and inspiration and courage to start speaking more truthfully about your own boundaries and how you are impacted by the boundaries of the other people in your life who are close to you. This is an important conversation for all of us to have. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching the recording, if that's what you're doing. And I'd just like to remind you that the recordings of this and all the other episodes of Soul Empowerment will be on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com. So you can go and watch previous episodes there. And I hope you'll come back to the next show. We got lots of great topics, lots of great people to help share those topics. Christy, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next time on Soul Empowerment.
Bye, everyone.